But just when they thought it was over, something unexpected happened. Yes, Kamma tribe, this is part 2 of the story. If you have not watched part 1, kindly do so. Demola received a call from his old company, the same one that had fired him months ago. Mr. Demola, the voice said, we reviewed your file. It turns out that your termination was based on false reports. Sincerely, we do not know what happened, but we are offering you the job back with a promotion, and your salary arrears for the entire period will be paid as well. Demola was surprised. He couldn't speak. Ijoma fell to her knees whispering, God, thank you. You just turned my Ekuru tears into testimony. By evening, the man of God came again and they shared the testimony happily. He smiled and said, you see, when the foundation is healed, blessings flow again. This is just the beginning. My God will embarrass you with blessings and more blessings. Ijoma looked through the window at the dusty village that had nearly swallowed her life. She smiled and said, truly, what we don't know is bigger than us. The next day, she looked rested. Her palms were clasped together on her lap and her lips were moving in silent prayer. Demola glanced at her and smiled. You are still praying? She opened her eyes. Is that even a question? After all we've been through? My dear, I can never stop praying, no. They journeyed back to Abeokuta, and 2 days later, Demola reported to the company's headquarters. The new director welcomed him warmly. We owe you an apology, Mr. Demola. What was done to you was unjust. You are now a senior project manager. We want you to supervise the next federal contract. He returned home that evening trembling with joy. His wife ran into his arms and he broke the news to her. They both sank to the floor, laughing and crying at the same time. Within weeks, they got settled fully, and one morning Demola said, IG, I have been thinking. We heard what the man of God said, but I still want to understand what this Ekuru really is, where it came from, and why it is sacred. Ijoma looked up from the table where she was sorting beans for lunch, and then she said, you are asking the same question that has been in my heart. With this, they decided to ask questions, but who would they ask? Most people only repeated rumors that Ekuru belonged to witches, that some Yoruba people forbade their daughters to sell it, and that even elders avoided eating it outside their family lineage. They went to see the eldest woman in their church, but she directed them to Mama Fadike. She told them she was one of the oldest women alive, and if anyone knows the story of Ekuru so well, it was her. So the next morning, they set out for Itoku, an old section of Abeokuta known for its markets and clay pots. Luckily for them, they found Mama Fadike. Her hair was white like cotton and her eyes were sharp like someone who has seen more than others. Demola greeted her respectfully in Yoruba. Ekaro ma. The old woman nodded slowly. Ekaro mommy, sit down. What brings you two to me? Demola hesitated. Then he said, Mama, we came to learn. We want to understand the story behind Ekuru. People say it is sacred. Some say it is evil. We just want to know the truth. The old woman looked at them for a long moment. Then she said, Many young people no longer ask questions before they do things. You are wise to have come. She took a sip from her calabash, then began to speak, her voice slow and steady, as though each word had been carried by time itself. Long ago, she said, before the white man entered our lands, our people had no rice, no spaghetti, and no fried foods. The staple was ewa, that is beans. From beans came many things, akara, moi moi, and ekuru. But ekuru was the first of them all. In those days, there was a famine that lasted 3 years. Crops failed, rivers dried, and many died. The elders gathered at the shrine of Unile, the spirit of the earth, to ask for mercy. The oracle said the famine would end if only a certain kind of food was offered, a pure food, white without all your pepper, symbolizing cleansing and peace. So the oldest woman in the town, a priestess named Mama Ajoke, who has served the earth goddess since her youth, prepared the first pot of what later became Ekuru. She peeled the beans, washed them clean, ground them without adding anything, and cooked it over low fire. When it was done, she wrapped it in leaves and presented it before the shrine with palm oil placed beside it. Note, I didn't say inside but beside, because the oracle said, "Do not mix the purity with the sacrifice." After that day, rain began to fall again. Crops grew, the rivers filled, and the people rejoiced. They named the food Ekuru from the phrase Ekuru, meaning thanksgiving of deliverance. From that time, Ekuru became a sacred symbol, the food of peace between man and the spirit of the earth. She paused, adjusted herself, and continued. Because it was first used for covenants, Ekuru was never meant to be sold. It was meant to be shared between families, between the living and the spirits. If a woman cooked Ekuru, she shared it freely. If she wanted to sell food, she sold akara or moi moi. Those carried no spiritual weight. But greed came. She spat lightly on the ground, shaking her head. One woman named Abebi from a nearby village decided to make money from Ekuru. She said, "If it can fill stomachs, why can't it fill my pockets?" She opened a store and began to sell it at the market. The first day, she sold plenty. The second day, her husband fell sick. The third day, her first child went mad. When she ran to the elders, they told her, "You have broken the covenant. The food of the earth is not for profits." But she laughed at them. By the seventh day, she was found dead, her body cold and her pot beside her still very hot, but filled with blood instead of beans. Since then, our people learned that no woman sells Ekuru unless she had been called into the inner society that guides it. That is the Iya Aje, the mothers of the night. Only them know the rituals and they alone can cook it without harm. If any outsider tries it, the spirit will come for her. Demola swallowed hard. "Mama, what does it mean when you say mothers of the night? Are they winches?" The old woman smiled faintly. That is what you young people call them. But in truth, Aje means power. It is the feminine mystery of creation and destruction. Every woman carries a little of it. The power to give life and the power to take it. But some women, through their ancestors, entered deep covenant with those forces. They used Ekuru as the symbol of authority. That is why it became known as the food of the night women. When a new member was initiated, she was fed Ekuru mixed with a drop of her own fluid. That was her oath to never betray the society, to never use her power unjustly, and to guide the secrets of the earth. But power once tested always tempts. So some used it for good, while others for evil. That is how the story changed from sacred to fearful. She lifted a finger, her voice lower now. "Do you know why Ekuru is always white?" Demola shook his head. "Because it represents purity without mercy. It cleanses, but it can also expose. When it is eaten, it draws out hidden things, sickness, lies, and secrets. That is why in some rituals, people are made to eat Ekuru to prove innocence. The guilty will vomit it, and that palm oil is served beside it. The red oil represents blood. Together, they mean the meeting of purity and sacrifice. That is why even today, if you cook Ekuru and serve it with oil, you are unknowingly repeating the ancient offering of Onyile." She looked at Ijoma carefully. "Now you understand why. When you sold it, they came for you. You entered their altar without invitation and you touched their covenant without knowing their rules. Ijoma was silent for a while, her eyes glistering. Mama, is it the same in every Yoruba town? The old woman shook her head. No, my child. Every land has its own covenants. In Abeokuta, Ekuru belongs to the Onile court. In Oyo, it is for Oshun's priestesses. In Ife, it is for the royal mothers. That is why some towns forbid strangers from selling it at all, while others allow it after certain prayers. Even Akara. That one has its own story. In the olden days, it was used to celebrate victory in war, fried at dawn to welcome warriors home. That is why even today, we fry akara on birthdays, naming days and funerals. It marks both beginning and end. But Ekuru? Here, Ekuru is for the unseen. The day you see a woman cooking it at midnight, just know she's not cooking it for people. The old woman sighed deeply, her eyes misty with memory. When the younger generation began to laugh at the elders, they stopped teaching these things. They said, old women and their nonsense. But look around. Sickness, poverty, confusion everywhere because we play with things we don't understand. Some food carries stories, some trees carry spirits, and even some songs should not be sung at night. She looked straight at Demola. Your great-grandmother was one of the last women who guided the Ekuru altar here. When she died, the covenant didn't die with her. He stayed waiting. That is why your white spot spoke, because the bloodline and the altar recognized each other. Demola's mouth went dry. He bowed his head ashamed. Mama Fadeke reached out and touched his hand. Do not be ashamed, my son. What the blood tied, grace can untie. You are lucky that your wife met the right power before it was late. Then, almost in a whisper, the old woman said, there is one more thing most people don't know. The real reason Ekuru became feared was because of what happened during a festival long ago. She leaned closer and both Demola and Ijoma could hear the trembling in her voice. During the annual Isese festival, a group of women decided to use Ekuru for a midnight ritual, but one of them betrayed the group. She took part of the food home to her husband. That night, thunder struck her house, and by morning, she and her husband and their newborn were gone. After that incident, a curse was placed that anyone who turned Ekuru into trade would invite the same thunder upon their house. That was over 100 years ago. But spirits don't count years. Ijoma sat quietly, goosebumps covering her skin. Mama, so does it mean people should never eat Ekuru again? The old woman chuckled softly. No, my daughter. The food itself is not evil. It is the intention that carries weight. When you cook it as a meal of peace, it blesses. But when you cook it with greed or pride, it provokes the spirits who first owned it. These days, people eat without prayer, cook without thoughts, and mock what they don't understand. That is why calamities repeat themselves. She took a deep breath and then she said, the gods are not hungry for blood anymore, but respect is still demanded. If you must cook Ekuru, pray first, speak peace over it, separate it from business and feed your family, not your pockets. By the time she finished, the afternoon sun had shifted low. Ijoma's eyes were wet with tears. Mama, thank you. I wish I had met you before all that happened. Maybe I would have known. The old woman smiled gently. That is why knowledge is very paramount. Don't just do things. Always ask questions. Seek to know before venturing into anything, especially if you are a stranger. Because a Ignorance can never be an excuse in the spiritual realm. Demola nodded slowly. Mama, I will never forget today. You have given us more than history. On their way home, neither of them spoke for a long while. Finally, Ijoma said, "So, it was never about witches, it was about covenants." Demola nodded. "And ignorance." She sighed deeply. "Then, I guess God didn't just save us, He taught us." That night, as they lay in bed, she whispered a short prayer. "Lord, thank you for the things we didn't know, and thank you for the mercy that came at the right time." Months passed, and peace became their new normal. Demola and Ijoma worked hard, prayed harder, and laughed often. Every morning before sunrise, the house rang with worship. Demola's company kept on expanding. The new director relied heavily on his honesty and precision, and soon another promotion followed. When he received his first big project bonus, he smiled and said, "This one is for the Lord." They tithed faithfully, sponsored widows in the church, and quietly paid the school fees of children whose parents couldn't afford it. One Sunday afternoon, as they relaxed after service, Ijoma said, "Dear, I think we should go back to the village. It's been long since we saw the man of God who helped us. We never really thanked him properly." Demola nodded. "You are right. If not for that man, I might have buried you." So the next week, they set out for the village. The journey took 4 hours, winding through dusty roads and green farmlands. As they entered the familiar streets, memories returned. The fear, the prayers, and the deliverance. But this time, the air felt light. They stopped first at Demola's auntie's house. She was overjoyed to see them. "You people look blessed too," she said, beaming. "See how God had changed everything." Demola smiled. "Mama, we came to thank the man of God who helped us." She sighed. "Ah, that one? He still preaches though his life is not easy at all. His church roof leaks, and once you see his wife and children, you would have successfully spent the word suffering. But he never complains. He's always smiling and he's always praying." Ijoma's face fell. "What? That genuine man of God is still struggling?" Demola clenched his jaw. "Then, maybe that's why God sent us back." They found him standing in front of a small church at the edge of the village. He was teaching a handful of people under a tree because the heat inside was unbearable. When the service ended, Demola and Ijoma approached him quietly. "Man of God," Demola said, "do you still remember us?" He turned and nodded slowly. "How can I forget?" They knelt before him out of respect. "We came to say thank you. My wife is alive today because of you, and God restored everything simply because you answered this call." He smiled again with his eyes moist. "We give the glory to God, my children. I am just a servant." But as they looked around, the cracked benches, the broken windows, the small pulpits made from planks, Ijoma's heart broke. The man's clothes were clean but old. His sandals were worn. Yes, his face carried peace deeper than wealth. Demola whispered to her, "No wonder my auntie said he never complains." That night, they couldn't sleep. Ijoma turned to her husband and said, "Dear, do you know what I am thinking?" He smiled knowingly. "You want us to build his church?" She nodded. "God used him to lift us. Now it is our turn to lift him." Within weeks, Demola arranged for an architect and a team of builders from Abeokuta. They came without announcing anything. At first, the villagers thought it was a government project. When they realized it was for the church, they rejoiced. The man of God wept openly when he saw the first truckload of materials. "My children," he said, shaking his head, "why such kindness?" Demola smiled. "Because you sowed prayer into our arches, sir. Now we are sowing gratitude into your soil." For months, they supervised the project from Abeokuta, visiting every 2 weeks. When the building was finished, they held a dedication service. The villagers came in numbers greater than anyone had ever seen. The man of God stood on the altar dressed in a new white robe Demola had bought for him. His voice broke as he spoke. Years ago, this land saw fear and darkness, but today it stands as a testimony that what God cannot do does not exist. After the dedication, the congregation grew. People who once ignored the small church now came eagerly. Traders, farmers, and even local chiefs sat under the new roof to hear the gospel. The same villagers who had excuses when he was inviting them were now very serious with church activities. Demola and Ijoma quietly funded a small mission house beside the church for visiting ministers. They also opened a scholarship fund for his children. Within a year, the church became one of the largest in the area. The man of God's life changed and his heart didn't. One day, he called them and prayed. He poured all his heart into that phone call and said that even the blessed will call them blessed. True to his words, the blessings multiplied. Demola started his own construction firm and Ijoma's foundation expanded into 3 states. Yet, in all their growths, they stayed simple. No matter how busy they were, they still prayed together before dawn, still attended midweek service, and still fasted once every month. Hey, African Tales by Kamma Tribe, how are you all doing? For me, I am doing just fine. I hope you enjoyed the story as much as I did. Before I leave today, I would like to say this. Life is full of mysteries, and wisdom is knowing when to ask questions before taking a step. There is a lesson in every pot of trouble life serves you. Ijoma and Demola's story reminds us that sometimes battles come not because we sinned, but because God wants to open our eyes to what we didn't know. Never make fun of your traditions, but above all, remember that Jesus remains the final authority over every tradition, old or new, because everything begins and ends in Him. And if life ever leads you into a battle you don't understand, do what Ijoma did. Hold on to God, pray and stay rooted. Don't ever run away from Him when things get hard. In fact, that is when you should even cling to Him the most. Finally, when God lifts you, don't forget the place where He found you. Use your blessings to bless others. On this note, I sign out from today's story, and I want to hear from you, my people. Do you think I outdid myself in this history story? And sincerely, did I open your eyes to things you haven't heard of? Drop it with me in the comment section. I'll be reading every single one. And please, don't just scroll away. Kindly give the story a thumbs up, share it out to your loved ones, and please subscribe to this channel if you have not already done so. And until I bring the next interesting story your way, it's a goodbye from here, and God bless you.